kids would at least get to enjoy watching themselves on live stream.
That was nice.
Were the kids there?
Mhm.
Were the kids there?
The kids.
The
that
Boy
were,
Scouts.
Oh, the Boy Scouts, I thought you meant your kids.
Oh, yeah. That was a good idea to do
Are
that.
we good to go?
Yes, ma'am.
So we'll call to order the meeting of the Planning and Parks Committee and do the roll call vote for us.
Councilmember Bregnati,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni, Councilmember Remy, Councilmember Dodwell,
Here,
Councilmember Bope,
Present.
Councilmember McCune,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Present.
Chair McCutcheon.
Here. Do I hear any corrections to the minutes? All those in favor?
Move they be
Need a
accepted.
motion.
I move they be accepted.
Thank you. Second? Crystal makes the second, and the first was made by Dr. Grignani. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion passes.
Thank you.
We don't have any public. So we'll go ahead and move into the parks and the park matters. There are 6 of them for consideration. Joe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before the meeting started tonight, I asked Ms. McCutcheon if we could maybe do the 3 separate items under park matters and then do the budgets combined, so it'd be more of a consistent flow in terms of discussion, et cetera. So she was kind enough to agree to that. So that's why I'll start with selection of a planning and design firm for the town center public space. It's often called the Village Green. First and foremost, we do thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate it very much. I know it's a difficult time of year, it seems, with the time change and everything going on and getting dark so early, but we do appreciate it. At our last meeting in September, the Department of Planning and Parks, along with our Department of Administration and the Economic Development Manager, provided input relative to 4 interviews that were conducted with consulting firms that had responded to our request for proposals. The 4 firms provided a variety of approaches during the discussion that was held when the interviews were conducted. Mr. Bope and Dr. Grignani attended all 4 of the interview sessions, so certainly they can add to tonight's discussion as well. As part of that interview process, it was requested by the chair and members of the committee that they be recorded, so as each individual member of the committee would have an opportunity to review the recordings, listen to the consultants present their proposal, and then hear the questions and responses that occurred thereafter. Again, in September, the department prepared a recommendation report that reflected collectively the entities that participated in the interviews. Mr. Bowe, Dr. Grignani, Mr. Anselm, Kathy, myself, and Julie. And so from that perspective, that memorandum has just been updated for the purposes of tonight's meeting and was included in your packet for your consideration. I did make a mistake at the September meeting that I want to correct tonight. Mr. Jacqueline, our Economic Development Manager, actually endorsed Power Sox. I had it as SWT, and so my apology, I apologize to him. And I make it clear tonight that it was Power Sox. So we left September's meeting with the charge that the members would take an opportunity over the next few weeks to review the recordings, to review the information that had been provided to you originally from the firms, and also the memorandum prepared by the Department of Planning and Parks. So tonight, I believe the intent was to discuss the 4 firms that were interviewed and collectively reach a consensus on which one would be best for the services we want relative to the 6-acre tract of land we now own immediately west of City Hall. I don't remember who said it at our September meeting, but I think there was a whole lot of truth to it, in that all four of the firms, any one of them would do a wonderful job for us. They're all qualified firms that have lengthy resumes of projects that have been successful both here in the region and across the state and elsewhere. Sometimes the decision-making process for staff is more technical, but that would never, in my opinion, usurp your all's gut feeling, so to speak. Something you saw, something you heard, or just a feeling you have. As council members, I think you have a unique perspective to make those decisions, and probably in many ways, probably do it as well, if not better, than staff in regards. So tonight, there is a diversity of opinions. I think Mr. Bope and Dr. Gragnani felt, forgot the name of it, Planning Design Services, PDS, was the #1 choice. Mr. Jacklin again thought Powers Bower Sox, and I believe Mr. Anselm, Kathy, and I thought human nature. So we made it easy for you. And with that, I'll conclude, because as I said, I know you've all been able to kind of review things now, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Krista, did we engage the Park Action Committee? Did we get some feedback from them?
We did not. Part was my responsibility, and I didn't get to it quick enough. And part is, if it's a critical component, we can certainly do it and make the decision, or a decision sometime in November or December. But it was my error on my part, and I didn't realize it till it was too late.
Okay.
So if that's a problem, we can certainly delay the decision.
I think we can open the discussion. Maybe I'll just come back to that at the end. I think that we should discuss it first.
Okay.
In reviewing all of the choices that we've got, I concur that these are all very qualified groups, but I like some of the creativity used by Human Nature. I think this park's a little bit different than some of the other parks that we have implemented, and it's also going to be used by a different audience. I mean, just the past couple of days that I've been in town center, I see people walking around with their dogs, older couples, younger couples, that kind of thing. And so I think we needed maybe a different focus on what Wildwoods parks need to be looking like versus what we've already implemented, just because we've got a slightly different audience, and number two, as chairman of the Admin and Public Works, or chairman of the Economic Development Committee, I just wanted to make sure that we have some creative design go into it so that we can help draw in some additional businesses in the area, hopefully. And we can use that as a key tool to do that, so that their employees have a place that they can come and enjoy a lunch, take a walk around the park if they get frustrated for something. Even those employees that we have working in the facilities around town center now, it would just be nice. And I think that Human Nature comes with a little bit more perspective on turning a park into an engaging human interaction place than some of the others, which are just your standard routine parks. That's just my view. So that's who I'll be voting for.
Dr. Gragnani?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of seeing all four of these firms up close and personal, and some of the things that they presented or didn't present. I can tell you that the concept of this particular piece of property is as a village green, which is distinctly different than a quote park unquote. Now, village green is just that, it's a green. It's not meant to be an active park, it's meant to be a very passive facility. It takes a special kind of group to grasp that concept, particularly in light of our situation here in Wildwood. I think that although Powers Bower Sox didn't present a specific design concept, I think they get it because they've been involved here, so that's one of the reasons why I put them at least number 2. But the Planning Design Studio Group was really, at first I thought, these guys don't get it, and then as I listened to them more intently, and then they put up some concepts, not that they were stuck on these concepts, they just wanted to throw it out that they had been thinking about it. They seem very much to get the picture of what this town, this green in the city was supposed to be. I was impressed that they had some really neat little concepts to add to the design. I think that they would be an excellent firm to accomplish that. And I guess with that, I have a question. Joe, is that Human Nature Group, that's a group out of Cincinnati, is it not?
Yes, sir.
I'll tell you, I don't know, I mean, you guys kind of liked what they did, I guess, in Cincinnati, but there are 2 things about them that sort of bother me. Okay, number 1 is they're not from here. That's number 1. That doesn't necessarily mean they can't get it, but it sort of leaves you with a little thought that maybe they don't understand us so much. The other thing is that what they did in Cincinnati, although it was nice for Cincinnati, was not exactly what we're looking for here, because that's a more active kind of engaged area than what we're looking for in this town center, this green. So that's one of the reasons why I kind of turned them off, and came down to the 2 that I came down to, number 1 being PDS and number 2 being Powers Bowersox. And I could go either way with those 2 firms and feel very comfortable with either one of them. Do you guys, and I'm going to ask you guys as a staff, do you have a specific feel for why you have Human Nature as your number 1 choice?
Well, and again, I don't want to speak for anyone other than myself, and certainly if someone wants to speak first, I don't always have to dominate the table, so to speak. So,
No, go for it.
the thing I liked about Human Nature is, you're correct, the overall, that Washington Park area, that was one of their key projects, had a number of very active locations, but also they did 2 things I really liked. First, they integrated an area where there was quiet and green and seating. And so they complemented all of the components with something I thought was very special. And they did it in a constricted area and made it basically look like it wasn't part of the rest of the project, which I thought was a real talented trick. The second thing I liked about them, more so than anything, they were one of the only firms that touched upon how the park, this village green, could be the impetus, the driver for economic development and further growth around the village green. That it could set the tone for what happens in the future. And I thought that was a key point, because it's a discussion we, as a committee, as our town center update team, and just individually amongst ourselves had, you know, what's going to happen west of us. And I think the firm that gets the understanding that they'll set the template and enunciates that or explains it to us early on is one that I have a tendency to lean toward.
Do you think you can work with these guys?
Certainly. If you want I'll say one last thing. If I were to pick a number 2 firm, it'd probably be Powers Bowersox.
Joe?
Sure. What I would ask, if you could pull up on the website, let's look at humannature.cc, because you can pull that up. Oh, you have to go to the computer there. But yeah, this will help visualize why too I feel that Human Nature seems to be someone that I think would be a good fit for us. And if you look over there and click on portfolio, there are a couple of parks that they've worked on, and so go to Parks and Preserves, and the one we've heard a lot about is Washington Park. So that does have some activity. If you scroll down, there's images. What I liked when I saw that is that Washington Park, if you go up to the, just look at this diagram here, it kind of mixes in a little bit of everything. If you go to the next slide, actually, it'd probably be a couple slides over, but this park does have activity. So it is kind of centered around what a village green is over there. But this slide right here really impressed me because it really resonates a lot with who we are in Wildwood. You know, you've got A, which is the expanded green space for that park. B, preservation, restoration. This is all about us. C, green infrastructure. Would love to see that. D, enhanced sustainable landscape. Again, huge for folks here in Wildwood. And then there are those E, those park amenities, which, you know, I think based on the input that we'll have, we can tailor those to how we want it to be. Now, if you go to another, I just want you to pull up one more park that they did that I thought was really nice. And it shows the creativity. If you go back to project overview and click on portfolio again, and go to Parks and Preserves, go to the Theodore, is it there, the Friendship Park, that's it. And do the images there. I just love the creativity that they could bring. They took this piece of land that you probably could never imagine, and look what a beautiful green space that became. And the design, I mean, I could see them making something very unique about this village green that you probably cannot find anywhere else around here. You know, and so I like that. I certainly feel that, you know, the staff feels comfortable working with them. You know, it's worth it. I'm with Joe too, that my second choice would be Bowers Sox, but something was about this group that impressed me a lot. And I think they can do something really nice with that park, and it doesn't have to be overly active. It could fit based on what we want it to be.
I have two things if you want staff's opinion. One, they've been pleasant to work with, and they all were really. I was the one who kind of worked through the process to this point. But I'm not afraid of them being out of town. That's exactly what we did in Community Park, and I think that is just a prime example of when you find the right firm, no matter where they are, the design this new phase in Community Park is beautiful. You all will be impressed, I think. So that part, and one of the designers for Power Sox is that firm out of New York. And so, but they've done an amazing project with Power Sox up by, now I'm not going to think of what the area with the music and by the radio station, yeah. But the other thing I think that really drew me to them is while the park and a lot of the photos show a huge level of activity, if you take away all the people, it's really subtle. There aren't big improvements, big structures, big anything. There's this workable space that I think is exactly village greenish. I think that it's, it really, I'll show you the one.
Well, just the last park you had, even from an aerial view, that's a beautiful design, just pleasing to the eye. But the fact that there are a variety of sculptured seating arrangements, and it's just very passive looking to me. You could sit out on the green like that if you wanted to, but on a normal day, if there's not a concert going on or something in that park, you could take your lunch out there and find a quiet spot and hide.
Yeah, this is their, I mean, it's called the Civic Green, but if you take away those people, there's really not much in the way of improvement. It's just a beautiful lawn space that works functionally with the spray ground, but it works functionally with for all sorts of different types of events.
I think we need to be really cognizant of what we put right next, what we put in the village green, because we're right next to residents. So we would want something that's quieter.
Great.
Crystal?
I think I'm just gonna hear exactly what you said in Joe's comments. I'm a big fan of them as well, and I thought that they did a really good job, but I really like how you put it on the slide. I mean, it really
Yeah.
just defines what we're trying to do, and I think that that's kind of the sales pitch to our residents of what we want to, our objective, because it's always hard to define an objective of what we're trying to do with this piece of land, and I think that that really focused well, and I agree. I think that last component, just to complement the Park Action Committee members that did a lot of work and surveys and things, is that's that last piece that they really worked on in the activity standpoint of, yeah, the village green is there. I like the two-part, you know, it kind of blends well. But I think that there was some level of activity, but not to the grand scheme of a big activity. Like you said, it is respectful of the neighbors. We do, you know, want to be friendly neighbors, but also allowing other activities to happen there as well. You know, I don't know about a big band concert. I don't know how that's gonna look at this point, but the space would be there. But I also like the economic development piece where they did show that in the background, and we can grow with that as well. So that's my vote, and I feel strong about it. If this takes a different route, then I think that the Park Action Committee should be involved before we make a final decision if this is not looked at for the voting piece. Because I think that there is a piece that they can be included during the development of what we're sitting down with them. So that's my 2 cents, but I would like to respect that committee because of the hard work that they did.
Joe?
I'll make a motion to go with human nature
I'll
as the
second.
finalist there.
And Katie seconds the motion.
What would you say?
She said.
Katie seconded it.
Oh, yeah.
John?
I have a whole bunch more questions before we get down to the decision-making process. In the last set of notes from the last meeting, Dr. Remy made a suggestion that we engage the public in some degree. And I don't think any of that's been done, obviously.
I think, and if I could please jump in, and to answer your point earlier, Councilmember McCutcheon, I think this is gonna be a project that is gonna create some strong opinions on both sides, you know, whether it should just be an open space or whether it should have a lot of activities. And so when I was listening to the four firms, I could only attend 2 of the meetings, but I watched the other 2 presentations online, or you know, on video. I think the Washington Park project is a perfect illustration of the result of the process that they use to take input from a number of different sources. So from my perspective, I'm a process guy, but I also understand some of the potential controversy that's going to come about as a part of this project. And I appreciated their approach to dealing with disagreement, you know, because we know there's going to be that. And they were able to find a way in a relatively limited space in Washington Park to be able to bring a lot of elements to the table that I think satisfy everybody. No one's going to be ever 100% satisfied with every project, but I think there were elements that they brought into that I was just impressed with. And to me, that shows a good process of listening. And so to your point, Dr. Gagnani, I think the public engagement piece comes during the open houses and during the surveying instruments. The public doesn't necessarily need to have input into the firm. They need to have input in what the project.
The suggestion wasn't mine, it was somebody else's, but I just...
That's just my response.
And I have two more questions. The second question is, it was about the public engagement was number 1. Number 2 was that we've made some changes in the town center plan. And I understand that they gave the okey dokey to the Latitude 38 project, which changes the complexion of TAD in that area surrounding the green. How does that play into the design process that's going forward here?
Well, downtown district still occupies the properties to the north of the Village Green site. There is an intervening property between the Village Green site and Latitude North 38 that's downtown designated. And then immediately to the east, City Hall is downtown designated. The south boundary's never been designated downtown district. It was always neighborhood edge. That's near Acres. That was a request the residents in near Acres made at the start of the town center planning process back in 1996. So there's still a perimeter one side developed with City Hall, there's still two sides of the remaining three, so to speak, that have downtown designated area. And from my perspective, a creative firm can take advantage of that and come up with a good solution.
Okay, that's question number 2. Question number 3 is, do we know what the cost of any of these particular firms is going to be?
Funny you should ask. Here in Missouri, we can't ask for cost or the amount that the services will be provided until you select a firm and then negotiate the price. I assume in Ohio they don't have that problem because as part of the response they gave us the cost, it was under $90,000 or less than what we budgeted.
Under 90.
Really?
For the design or for the?
For the 3 steps in the process, the environmental inventory, public input phase, and then the development of the plan.
Is this a state law?
I assume Ohio doesn't have the same.
It doesn't.
Missouri is quite unique in a lot of respects, including state statutes.
Well, what's unique about this project too is that they're along the Ohio River, which we don't have, okay? And that makes a lot of difference in what that looks like. I'm just saying, but, you know, that's something to consider. That this is a whole different, this is a different kettle of fishies here than what we're trying to do here. Our situation's a little more simple actually than that.
Yeah. I think they get that. I'm just gonna, I should have raised my hand, but I think they get that they know that this is a different project.
Well, I'm not going against everybody else's decision. I'm simply trying to get down to some brass tacks here. You've answered 3 important questions, which would be appropriate for any one of these firms that I need to know the answer to. The cost, the public input. Now, I know that the firms all said that they would do some public engagement, so I heard all that. They have a plan for how to set that up, and that's fine. And I'd expect them to do it, but they're all going to do that, so it's not just this group that's going to do it. And the other thing is the changes that we're making in our town center design, and I had some concerns about that, and you've answered it. You said we've left us a perimeter for rimming the green with small shops, basically.
And again, our small brick and mortar shops are reality in today's retail market. I don't know. But we have 3 acres on one side. We have probably 9 acres across Crestview Drive on the north side. And we have all of town center here. So if a firm can't come up with something creative to utilize that amount of space and integrate it all and protect the neighbors as has been said here, then obviously we pick the wrong firm, but I don't think human nature would allow that to happen.
Crystal?
So I just want to, and Joe, this is a question for you. So this body here is charged with trying to kind of look at the Village Green as its own self. Can the town center or any other body interrupt what we're doing here, or we step on each other at some point in time? I just don't want like he said, the town center is changing. Do they have influence or say into this right now, that committee with us, and how is this going to, will it overlap or will we have any issues?
The town center update team is a recommending body. So anything that they recommend will ultimately go before Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. So nothing that they would do would necessarily be unreversible. So from that perspective, they do have a role, and part of the responsibility of the consultant and all of us is to ensure that that their role is recognized and hopefully integrated into it. More importantly, I think the Economic Development Committee needs to have a role as well, so that perspective is never left as this, the second thought in the discussion. Because as you'll recall with Mr. Kennedy, and a lot of his photographs from his travels in the Northeast, there was always a commercial component almost in at least 1 or 2 sides of the Village Green, not all in all instances. So I think it's really important. So I see the town center update team Economic Development Committee providing support to this community.
I just want to make sure, because there's volunteers on there that don't pay attention to what we're doing in this committee and economic development, that you have your own thing going. And I just hope that the three of us are talking and they're not having one idea, we have another idea, and there's another idea, and then we try to come together. And how do we face that? So I just want to make sure that as we move forward, that who's really the driving force here at this point in time with input over each committee.
Well, I think if we take the, I'm sorry, Deborah.
Katie, go right ahead.
I think if we take the input that's been given to us by the Town Center Committee as part of the information we give to the firm, if we take, if they can do an interview process with the Economic Development Committee and with Julian so that they understand where that particular committee would like to see some growth here in the town center, then we, as a committee here, need to take that input back, I think, and help guide where we want that park designed to go.
Yeah, and I just, like I said, I think me and Dr. Bergmani have said that. With everybody involved, we just don't want to lose the vision of what a village green is.
No.
So each committee, I want to make sure that, you know, he's educated a lot. We keep talking about this. It's not a park. It's not this. So
No, it's not
if
a
we
park.
can just make sure, and Joe, you know the concept that we're all talking to one another. I just don't want to lose that sight or have other ideas thrown in, and it kind of derails what this is. This
Yeah,
vision
I
looks like.
don't want to merry-go-round in the park.
Okay. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Ferris
The
wheel.
Or a
town
Ferris
center-
wheel.
The town center team has been very hands-off regarding these properties. They've had questions and want to know how its relation will impact the regulating plan and how any decisions they make in the downtown district or the adjacent property to the west, how that may impact
Okay.
whatever council develops in this park, but they haven't gotten.
Okay.
They
They
still have a few months left, not to
meeting with
say
them, so
that.
I don't know what's going on up
But
there.
they-
Yeah.
they stay very much.
I'm on the committee as liaison for council, and I think she's right on.
Okay.
And I think the ultimate driving force is going to be the residents and the residents' input.
Right.
I mean, we can take things and have them look at it, but also provide a way for them to give ideas of what they'd like to be in the village green.
Sure.
So I think we're kind of doing the framework piece, and then they'll put all the details into it.
That makes me feel better. Thank you.
Especially for some of the residents on your two wards that are going to be able to walk to this more easily than my ward or his ward.
They want to walk to his statue at the end of the.
You read my mind. You know what? I'm gonna have everybody vote to recommend to put your statue.
There you go.
I should see, it's gonna be a contest.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor and a
Yeah.
second.
We've got a motion on the floor.
One on each end.
Do you wanna do a roll
The
call
statues
vote?
look at each other.
Councilmember Greg Notty,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Bowe,
Yes.
Councilmember McCune,
Yes.
Councilmember Garetano,
Yes.
Chair McCutcheon.
Yes, that motion passes.
Thank you.
And the next item is revised location of the public art structure wording.
Yeah.
Your
Speaking of,
sidekick dog.
Speaking of statues,
This is a fun one, though.
I got a quote on 100 pigeons. So,
You got a quote on it.
I know you're going there.
They'll be arriving 2 weeks after the statue's
after
in
the
place.
statues up, the pigeons.
Funny.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, as you'll recall, the Department of Planning and Parks presented to you in the past couple of months a proposal for the placement of a sculpture at the southern terminus of the second pedestrian bridge over Route 100. There's a little circular island that's a component of the overall trail system that's located there, and the sculpture seemed to be almost perfect for placement in that little circular area. Our contractor, Glenn Gailey, came to Kathy and I and expressed some reservations about placing this sculpture at that location, given that at some level, it is more isolated and it doesn't have the lighting that other locations that the city's public space may have. And so he just basically explained that the entire sculpture is premised on the two legs of the Frisbee dog for the purposes of its stability. And Mr. Daly was concerned that if someone were to sit on it or try to push it over, it may not be as hard as one might expect. Additionally, given the texture of the sculpture, Mr. Daly expressed reservations about graffiti as well. Again, because it doesn't have 24-hour surveillance, lighting, nor anyone up in that area during certain times of the night. The trail facility closed at 10 p.m. in Town Center, and again, do not open until dawn or about 6 a.m. So the thought is to come back to committee, explain the concerns of our contractor, which both Kathy and I believe have validity, and offer possibly two other locations for your all's consideration. The first would be on the west side of existing City Hall in the Butterfly Garden. It was a rainy day, so I apologize, but for the most part, there is space for the sculpture given its size, and certainly could be well integrated into that nice existing green space. The other would be community garden. There is a seating area near the west entrance in the community garden under the cedars, but the gardeners have spent much of the summer making it into a nice space for shade, seating, and relaxation, or more toward the entry into the community garden by the parking lot for City Hall. All three of these locations, two locations, community garden on the west side of City Hall, have lighting, more activity, and certainly a key component, police headquarters. And so the feeling is that there's a higher probability that the Frisbee dog would not be damaged or vandalized if here versus along the trail near the terminus, southern terminus of the pedestrian bridge. From the perspective of the Department of Planning and Parks, any of these locations are fine. And we truly are wanting your input and decision. So thank you.
Joe,
You
Sorry,
want
go
to
read first.
Good.
All right. Well, yeah, it is sad to see the Frisbee dog have to move from that area by the bridge, because I thought that was going to be a nice area, but all the reasons you have said make perfect sense that it could be damaged. You know, people walking on the trail, especially if it's late at night, or there's always sometimes stories of mischievous activity with young adults. We've had some serious cases where they've thrown things over the bridge. So I could see that dog being attacked. And I'm assuming we don't have an option to swap out the dog for some other type of statue that would fit.
Well, we were late to the party, so to speak, in the selection of the sculptures because there is an agreement that has to be processed. So we didn't get first choice or second choice.
That was supposed to be his.
So from that perspective, we took what we thought was best, which was what was left. Now, in a couple of years, we'll be able to change it out, and we'll be a part of the process sooner than later.
So my opinion, and I will not make a motion until you probably have a chance to express your thoughts, is where it's going to get the most benefit. And I seem to lean towards the entrance to the park. Although the Butterfly Garden, right by Sam's office, I don't think I've really ever seen anyone sitting in there or there. And so we drive by it, and that's about it. It looks nice. Huh?
I thought about going out there just to.
So,
Put your
yeah, true. And you know, it would complement, we already have an art statue on the path entering City Hall, so putting one on the opposite end of the parking lot entering the community garden gives us two art type statues. So I think that it adds more to the entrance, although I did think about the wooded area over there. But I seem to think that, you know, in the wooded area, if people are sitting at the bench, there might be kids climbing over the dog. You know, they'll see it there. So that's my 2 cents, the entrance to the park.
Some questions. First of all, are we absolutely committed to putting up some sort of this statuary of the dog somewhere?
No, we've agreed to participate. I'm sure it's not mandatory. We can always return the sculpture, but I think that for the future, it does have a really nice potential. And if we're participating sooner in the process than later, I think we'll see, I think we'll be able to select sculptures that are probably less worrisome than the Frisbee dog and probably could be placed at other locations.
Okay, the next question is, what are you gonna put at the end of the walkway for the crosswalk?
Where the dog.
Landscaping.
Where you were going to put the dog, what are you gonna
Yeah.
put there in its place?
Landscaping.
Just landscape? Okay. And then the last question, I guess, that I have is, or the comment I have is, I agree that it won't be seen very well at the end of City Hall. People will just go by it and not even know it's there. So it needs to be, if you're gonna put up a sculpture, for God's sake, put it somewhere where people will see it. You know, I mean, I don't really care where it goes specifically, but I think it should be seen.
Thank you.
Crystal?
I like the entrance to the community garden where it can be seen more visible. Inside the community garden, not everybody accesses that, so I think that the full city doesn't get the pleasures of that. I think outside that gate would be a nice
Candy
compliment.
I just had a quick question. Was there any reason not to put it up on the front side of City Hall, maybe over where we've got the police department, but we've got that big patio out front where it can be seen a little and be a little bit more visible? I don't know if we have any cameras on that area though, so.
I thought about that, placing it out there at the top of the steps
Mhm.
in the northeast corner. And there's a base to it which isn't necessarily as appealing in appearance
Okay.
as to the Frisbee dog itself. So the thought was is,
Hide it in some plants?
yeah.
Okay. Then I go for the entrance to the community garden so that it can be seen from people parking here or driving through here.
Could you put plantings around, if you put it out here in front, could you put plantings around the base?
You could certainly try with some potted plants or something like that.
Yeah,
like
move some of your
maybe a
pot.
larger. But I think part of it is too, it has to be set in ground, the base itself. That's why I was looking.
To stabilize it, okay.
I was looking for locations, but,
It's like mounted on a one-ton boulder.
yeah, so it just
Happened.
yeah, so I was just thinking if we could excavate and put it in grade, it'd stabilize it better.
Mhm.
Any other comments?
You know, one last comment. My wife, the horticulturist, has noted that nobody's taking care of the equisetum. We also have some plant issues along the front of the wall of City Hall.
Mhm.
She is very noticing of that. Whatever you do with this dog, you put the plantings around it, you better take care of it or she'll complain.
Noted, sir.
She's never complained to me.
Oh, she
Or
complains,
you?
but you're not the councilman, I am.
If Ms. Gragnani would like to send us those concerns, we'll try to address them as best we can.
You're gonna ask her at the next P&Z meeting.
All right, thank you.
Do I hear a motion?
I move that we planted the dog statue at the entrance, what are we calling this?
Community garden.
Into the community garden, but not in the community garden.
I have a second.
I'll second.
Crystal seconds the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion passes.
I just wanted to make a comment, you showed a picture of the dog, and in the picture, I assume that was a Frisbee, not a UFO.
Yeah.
It's a big dog, or a small UFO.
The next item is the stormwater impacts on the cost of Ward 5 Park, Ward 5.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the committee, it is with some trepidation that the Department of Planning and Parks brings this information back to you. But as you know from previous meetings, the department has tried to advise you of the progress of this discussion relating to stormwater improvements in Ward 5 Neighborhood Park since it first discovered the issue. And not to belabor the background, but the issue related to a decision made by the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District to require stormwater management facilities in and as part of the neighborhood park for Ward 5. The reason that decision is unexpected is that general standards applied across the two major jurisdictional boundaries of the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, the City of St. Louis, the County of St. Louis, and St. Louis County, is that if you do less than an acre of disturbance, site disturbance, and you generate less than 2 cubic feet per second of runoff, you are not required to do stormwater management. The assumption is that those levels do not generate enough stormwater to cause concerns about channel protection, flood mitigation, and water quality. Just so happens this year, their executive director visited Wildwood, stood at the podium and heard a lot about problems in Cox Creek, made his request of residents of Wildwood to support the stormwater tax, but it did not pass. And so from the perspective of the sewer district, they are now requiring, I believe across the board, stormwater management facilities regardless of the rates and the level of disturbance. Guess who got caught first? The city of Wildwood. We started with all three components: channel protection, flood mitigation, and water quality. Water quality, as you'll recall, required us to enter into easement agreements with homeowners associations on either side of the park property. That was complicated and certainly led to some concerns about just the cost, the responsibility, the coordination. The sewer district was agreeable to relinquishing on water quality, but they would not consider negating the channel protection and flood mitigation. So this was all explained to City Council in a memorandum back, I believe, in the early part of September. Thereafter, the department was given permission by the committee to proceed forward and seek a bid from the selected contractor for the stormwater management plan, which has been approved by the sewer district for implementation. The contractor provided the number back to the city, $91,000. That's $91,000 that was not anticipated, but certainly is now a requirement. Otherwise, the sewer district will not issue a permit. It will not allow the restroom facility to be connected to the sanitary sewer line. It will not allow discharge of stormwater into the natural drainage ways in its vicinity. So the department is respectfully requesting the consideration of the following: to incorporate the additional $91,000 into the cost of the project, which partially would be reduced by the elimination of the short trail segment that is shown in the heavy dark shaded area. I think it's important to emphasize that the trail segment is important, but would not connect to any trail to be built to the south in the right-of-way and ultimately to the villages of Brightleaf at this time. So it was a trail, so to speak, to nowhere. That's an approximate $15,000 savings. Thereafter, the department reviewed existing capital improvement projects that have not yet been started in 2019. budgeted at the end of 2018 with the intent to try to get them underway in 2019. Two projects immediately rose to the top: Cone Park and the potential for adding a small parking lot area there as a trailhead. That project, quite frankly, isn't necessary any longer with the John L. McCabe Memorial Trailhead on Centaur Road. I did leave some money in the Cone Park line item for a drainage problem and ponding that occurs at the edge of North Etherton Road. The remainder came from the Wildwood Greenway Corridor, Phase 6, which is a segment of trail that would go from the western entrance into Community Park on Route 100 to Pond Road. Mr. Cruz spent the better part of a month putting together a grant application for that segment of trail to complement the funds that had been set aside. A key element of that grant application was that MoDOT had to agree, for all intents and purposes, to say that they wouldn't be widening the Route 100 at that location. Now remember, it's already 4 lanes with improved shoulders, a large median, turn lanes, et cetera, et cetera. But they said no, and the Department of Natural Resources said no. So with the available funds, we didn't have enough to even start the project. So it seemed logical to take the remaining amount, approximately $64,000, out of that line item of $255,000 to put toward the Ward 5 Park. It's a surprise. It's no one's fault here at City Hall, regardless if it's City Council, to this committee, to the City Administrator, to the Director of Planning and Parks, to the Assistant Director and the Superintendent. There was no expectation. The park designer spoke with MSD early on, long before pencil hit paper, so to speak. It's just a change in direction, and in that case, we're obliged to address it. I'll conclude real quickly. The benefit of the park is not diminished by the additional cost, in the opinion of the department. It's an area of high density. It's an area, unfortunately, in my opinion, that was developed by St. Louis County, and what was left in terms of common ground is detention basins and areas of the site that had such excessive slopes that they couldn't be developed on. Those characteristics make it unusable for anyone to basically recreate. And so from a recreation standpoint, this is our best offer to residents in what I believe is Ward 4 as well as 5. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, I'm not surprised about MSD. I think John's MoDOT is feels like my MSD. Maybe they're both the same. But
I hate them both, thank you.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one here. And, we have other issues like the creek, and MSD is probably the party that is not coming to the table at all. That's separate discussion, and we need to figure out how we get their attention. Maybe we
That's
need to
part of
build-
the problem is we got there.
Yeah, so, MSD, coming around and after hearing us complain and now imposing these kinds of requirements which cost us more, my argument has always been that, they ask for these Calks Creek fees and all these things, but we don't see it returned back to us. We don't get our full dollar's worth. And it's not fair to us. But that's something we just have to figure out. How do we work to try to get MSD to start treating us better? This park, I think we've been through this over and over again, and we've seen probably hundreds of people come through over the course of the meetings that we were committed to it. I mean, I think at this point we've already, been going down, we're spending money on this, so I don't think it's really an option to say, no, we can't do this, and then all of a sudden put this on the shelf. I'm grateful that you could look at the trail. It makes sense right now to, let's take the trail out. That's a savings there of money. And certainly don't want to shortchange the park anymore, because if we're going to do it, let's do it right. Let's do it what we committed to doing. And I'm really glad that you did do some homework on this to see about other options, that we are not going to do any work this year. So regarding the Cone Park repairs, I've driven by Cone Park, you come around the curve, I don't think I've ever seen anyone there. But you're right, we now have the John LeCave trailhead, which is beautiful, paved, nice little shelter there, and that's right down the road. And in fact, I think that's the right place for it, because people have access. So I do agree that it probably is best to not spend as much on Cone Park for now, except for those necessities like you mentioned here. And then with the Wildwood Greenway corridor as well, you know, you identified this as another option. So it looks like it's worked out where we are able to find the money, and we brought it down from 91 to 76. I also see though that we did estimate it was probably going to be about 70. So we brought it down just a little more than what we estimated. I don't have an issue because we've cut this park down. I think the original cost, if I recall, was $1 million or over.
Mm-hmm.
And we brought it down, I don't remember the exact figure, about 700,000 or so. So we're still under what we brought it down. So I think it's unfortunate. We just have to do it though, to make it happen here. And at the end of the day, I think we're gonna have to make that decision. So I'm fine with, you know, if you want me to put a motion on the table to discuss it, I'll make the motion for this piece here.
Wait a second.
Can you second it, or?
I just wanted to ask some questions before I did.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Is it open for discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kate?
Question for you, what's the total cost to date that we've spent, or we're planning on spending on this park before we got hit with this bill from MSD?
As you'll recall, we received a favorable bid from Demeen Construction. The estimate that the park designer provided was in excess of about $750,000.
Okay,
The
$750,000.
bid came in just under $700,000.
Yeah.
And then we did the two add alternates, additional landscaping up in the parking lot area, which is in closest proximity to the two residences.
Okay.
And then shade structures for the benefit of young children and playground. So it ended up about just under 750, which was consistent with the estimate that the park designer gave without the two add alternates.
Yeah, okay. Another question I've got, on this new MSD requirement, if we did not put the restrooms there, would we still comply with MSD's requirements, or would there be additional work for the water management component off of the surfaces there?
We would still have to comply with the stormwater management. The leverage they have is saying that you cannot connect your public restroom facilities to their system. That's the leverage. And that's a pretty big one.
Yeah.
Because obviously, we could do portable restroom facilities, but at the end of the day, we're still going to have to manage stormwater runoff. There are
Okay,
twofold-
because, I mean, part of the reason I've got the question is Anniversary Park, which was in my ward, or is in my ward, was without a restroom for close to 10 years.
Right.
So I was looking at this going, well, why don't we do the same thing that we did at Anniversary Park and save the $90,000, walk away from the table with MSD and see if they maybe change their mind in a year or two and go, okay, let's put a restroom in then. So that's what I was trying to look at, is could we do that as a possibility, especially since this is so close to all the homes of its potential users. If you have to go to the restroom, you either use the porta potty or you did like we did in Ward 4 for 10 years, you went back home. So.
And it's a valid point because, as you know, we opened Anniversary Park in approximately 2005.
Mhm.
It was not until probably 5 to 7 years later we installed the restroom facility. But the key point in Anniversary Park is we didn't have to do stormwater.
Yeah.
The decision not to do the restroom facility was premised more on just, we're 10 years old, the funding wasn't as,
Mhm.
the park was more expensive than we thought,
Mhm.
and we wanted to basically complete the park knowing we could come back. Here, the restroom facility is inconsequential in many regards because they're gonna say if you put any impervious surface down, you've gotta manage your runoff.
You've got to manage the water. Okay, that was the reason for my question, because I've been to parks in other parts of St. Charles County, St. Louis County that do not have restroom facilities. So I was looking to see if there was some way that we could reduce the overall cost on the project, even though we have reduced it quite a bit, but so that we could move forward with it and kind of thumb our nose a little bit, sorry MSD, at MSD and say, fine, you don't want to play, then we're not going to play with you. But
So Joan, what did the Anniversary Park cost?
it was not cheap either, I know.
I'd be hard pressed. It was, again, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Mhm.
but, you know,
The restroom facility that we finally got, I know, was around 150,000,
Yeah.
which was astronomical to me too.
And remember that the funny
You could buy
thing
a
about-
house for that.
Yeah, well, that would be my position. If you read Carnegie and you look for a career when you're young, you want to get into park equipment.
I know. We just worked with our church trying to get some new
It's like- it's-
playground equipment.
So
Oh, God.
what our restroom, you could build a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And we got that because someone reneged in Florida. We got it at a
I know we
reduced
got
price.
that deal on that one.
It's
I just
crazy
wanted to
as
make
that's
sure we were,
So even if we don't put a restroom there, don't we still have to do the MSD requirement?
yes, that's what he was saying. That's what he
Yeah.
was saying. So it's null and void. It just bothers me, as it does many of us.
Yes.
Crystal?
So, just to start off, and these are the questions, I think that we've discussed this before, is that looking at the additional money, and I really appreciate your breakdown, but again, we have a community park that we spend a lot of money on that's pretty close to this park. And I'm just talking about where I, in Ward 7 and the people that I hear from. So the questions come up, just like we keep mowing over, like why do we put plants in the middle of the median? These capital improvement, and Sam, this is gonna come back to you again, from the residents. This capital improvement budget that you refer to all the time, what else can we use that money for? Because people are saying there's other things in the city that need to be managed or looked at versus beautifying what's going on. So this is the pressure that I continuously get. We have safety issues. Yes, we have the Lake Chesterfield Dam that needs to be okay. You don't know what that price tag's gonna come in or what the problems are yet. So how are we gonna manage that? We have Woods Road, we have the culverts, we have other big things that are going on, and Cox Creek. So I just have a hard time answering these questions in the seat that I sit in for the people that we represent as a community. And I agree, I think this is something that's been put in motion and that it is moving along. So I don't want you to think that I am totally against this. I just want to be comfortable in order to answer those questions of the residents of why would you vote for that money when we have all these other problems? And if there's this big fund that you're talking about in capital improvement, why can't that be used for this? So I'm going to turn to you guys to answer these questions because that's what, as a council person, I'm voted into to use their money appropriately.
think, and I'm not fully prepared to answer the question, but I do know when the capital improvement sales tax was presented to voters,
Mhm.
my guess is there was some ballot language that would stipulate what it would be used for. And so that's what it can be used for. It could be used for park improvements, it could be used for road widenings or trails, but you really have to be careful with how you spend those dollars. The only fund that you can use to supplement other funds is the general fund. Every other one is a dedicated revenue source or a dedicated expenditure. So I would have to go back and do some research in terms of what the ballot language said for the capital improvement sales tax. But really that is guessing in Wildwood as well as other cities. That's really the only fund cities have to do new projects with sort of in response to residents.
So my follow-up question is that fund, I mean, where are you at as far as that, what you can't use that, how are we on the budget?
We are underwater on the budget right now, so the projected, we are projecting a deficit in next year's capital improvement fund. That includes the capital improvement sales tax, but that also includes the road and bridge fund that are resurrected this year, which can be used for primarily road projects, which
So as this body hears that, and you're gonna vote for something that this is for, we're gonna be in the water, and we're gonna be below the deficit in this fund, I can't support that. That's just what our government does now. It's mismanagement of funds. And that's my duty to make sure that the city is managing our funds appropriately, and not just tossing it to different projects that aren't necessarily needed. Could we postpone this? Sure.
No.
But until this budget, if I have the floor, I think, I don't comment when you're talking. So what I'm saying is for the general thing, if you guys can rest your head fine on a pillow to say that we're in a deficit and we're gonna throw money at this project that's really not needed or urgent, where there's other problems in the city, that the capital can be used for parking, flooding, whatever that's gonna come up that you don't know, and he's gonna need to define that. I make a motion that we postpone this project until we can find out if we're okay with the budget.
We already have a motion on the floor.
I'm asking for, can I make another motion on top of a motion?
A postponement is a proprietary motion, so it would supersede the motion on the floor to proceed with the additional expenditure. We'll need a second, then we can discuss the motion.
Okay,
I'll second so we can discuss that motion.
that's fine.
So, do you want to go first?
If you don't mind, just a couple of points. Sam, Mr. Ansel, our city administrator.
Sam's
Sorry.
okay.
Was correct. The ballot language is the tail that wags the dog, so to speak. The problem we're facing, and we saw this the other night in the Watershed Erosion Task Force, people with real problems coming to us and saying they're beyond the scope of what I can address. The problem we're having, though, is somebody's got to stand at the podium and say, it's on private property. We can't use public taxpayers' dollars to fix a problem on private property. It's Lake Chesterfield, it's Cox Creek, it's Fox Creek, it's across the city. And it's hard to listen to the people's stories and say there's really not much we can do other than provide advice, technical information, and maybe some basic engineering if there's a way to relate it to a road, something the city owns in its vicinity. So that's the main reason that we can't help with, for all intents and purposes, anybody would want to. It's just what state statute says, and it's what we struggle with day in and day out. I can assure you that by the time you see a budget at the end of December, through the efforts of our finance manager and our city administrator, we won't be underwater. And I have a solution, and it's not a popular solution, and it was going to be brought up later, but here's the scenario. Tonight, you all made a recommendation to engage a consulting firm for Village Green. It'll take us the rest of October and probably all of November to get the contractual components all completed. We will start the project in December. We've got 2 weeks basically. We'll start in 2020.
All of the firms gave us a projected timeline, and the shortest one was 7 to 8 months to complete. We have $800,000 in the capital improvement budget to do construction in Village Green, and I can promise you, we won't be there.
You will, and I was gonna ask this question. We have a bigger question to answer, which is, I think we need to figure out that, I'm going a little off topic here, but if it's okay with the body here, I think getting the design ready, but pulling the trigger to build it, we need to figure out is, first, how do you get people to access that park? And we can't build a park you can't get to, the Village Green. And that, I think, is gonna have to be a question we're gonna ultimately have to answer. And I could see that also coming up, that may affect timelines. So just a thought there, but, you know, and I think that's, I really, I know you're all spinning the wheels there trying to figure it out, and that's why I do feel good that, you know, we are not going to, you know, and I say it because I trust the people that work here, that we will find a way, and if decisions need to be made. This train has unfortunately been leaving the station for some time, and so that's where, anyway.
And again, my statement isn't showing favoritism to one or the other, it's just a practical statement.
No.
Because,
That's a good point.
again, those timelines that were provided by the consultants are probably, I would say, hedged a little because they don't want to make it sound like, oh yeah, we're going to be slow and it's going to take forever. Go ahead and hire us.
Sure.
But just as, you know, saying that, it's just practically speaking. So we get a concept plan, we get a design plan. That's not an engineered plan. That doesn't include them bidding. It doesn't include taking all the bid packages through the process. It doesn't include the council.
Or MSD review.
Yeah, look at that.
Well, I was on the city park
Oh, yeah.
planning
Yeah.
committee, what, 8 years ago, 9, 10 years ago? So, yeah, it's a slow process.
So I can assure you, I think both Sam and I just didn't feel like it was a priority in 2019 to get construction money in the capital improvement budget for that site. But practically speaking, it doesn't need to be there in 2020.
Not for construction, but I think our constituents are requesting a design phase and public engagement for that Village Green space next year, or we will have, as you know, some very vocal individuals that will be up at the podium, as you said. Yeah, where the motion is,
We
yeah,
both have
I know.
comments to make, so John, go ahead.
Yeah, I have not, I've been sitting here listening very patiently to all of this. Let me just say this, there's nobody in this room who's more of a fiscal conservative than I am. And you heard me about this. I think we've basically been worked over by another bureaucracy. This is typical of what we get. I have some suggestions later for that issue, particularly with MSD. But I'll reserve that for comments at a later time. For right now, we've spent a lot of money on this park already. We've got a commitment to this park already. If we don't complete this thing, we're gonna waste all that money. It's gonna go down the drain, and the cost will expand later if we try to come back and do it at a later time. We didn't expect this to happen. This was an unforeseen expense, and that's not unusual in construction projects. Unfortunately, we got the short end of the sewage district's stick. And I think it's, you know, we'll pay them back at a later date. I think that if he's come up with the money to be able to cover this, I think we should go ahead and cover it, but no more tricks from them, or there's gonna be some trouble, okay, with them, okay, for them. Okay, anyway, this is the way I see it. So I think we should go ahead and get this finished and get it underway. Do we have any other surprises waiting in the wings that you know about? Then let's do this. Vote on your motion to postpone, because you have to kill that motion or vote it up or down, and then we'll come back and deal with the original motion.
So to clarify, you're asking to move forward with the additional of MSD, the motion is which is the original motion, is that what you're trying to do?
Well, the original motion was to go ahead with the money, allocate the money for the MSD requirement for the park. I believe this was the motion, was it not?
But we have to vote
So-
on.
But you gotta
So
vote,
if-
we gotta vote it.
If
in
I
motion.
can, I'll remove the motion, if that's okay, if the second, and I will just remove it if that's possible.
Draw the motion.
I'll withdraw the motion.
And I do have a comment. This park has been, at least since 2011, when I came on city council. And I know there was interest and tried to get something done prior to that. We've had over 300 residents just at one time come forth and ask for this park. We've had residents who have come forth many times since the initial request for the park. So I would have a very hard time telling my constituents this is not going to happen. This park is farther from Community Park than Village Green is going to be. So if we're going to say we can't do a Ward 5 park, which has been in the works, and basically we have a contract to do, how can we say, no, we're going to go do the Village Green instead? Or how can we come back and say, no, we paid for, to look into safety concerns for Lake Chesterfield? This has been going on way too long. Ward 5 has not been an equal partner in getting a lot of funds that have been spent throughout the years. This is something that residents have put a lot of time into. They've been in public input sessions. They helped design this. This was their concept. You should support it. They're citizens of Wildwood. You answered it in as well. So we have a motion on the floor. And let's take a roll call vote, please.
Roll call vote for this?
Yes, please.
Councilmember Gregotti?
This is for the motion to postpone.
No.
No, this is for the motion to
Oh,
support.
that
the
was, sorry,
extra
let's
fund.
take it up.
Yeah.
Okay, for the motion, yes.
Councilmember Dowell?
Yes.
Councilmember Bowe?
Yes.
Councilmember McCune?
Before I make my vote, I just want to clarify, I think that you made a good point about it's going to cost us more and the expenditures that have occurred. I don't disagree with what your residents are saying, and yes, we all represent each other, and we're all going to need each other for different wards for different projects. So I didn't want you to think that this is a personal thing, it's just more of the questions of the financials and how this works. And that's what I keep getting, because they're reading the agendas. So for that reason and what you've explained, and I think this is a good discussion, I'm in favor of moving forward because of what Dr. Gregotti had kind of filled us in. You're right, it's gone. And like you said, the train's left and it's kind of hard to stop that train, that it was unknown that we've already spent that money to this extent, that this is the surprise element. So I agree, I don't think that's anybody's one concern. I don't think that's yours personally, it's MSD. And I'm sure it's going to happen more. So for that, I will vote yes.
Councilmember Garitano?
Yes.
Chair McCutcheon?
Yes. On behalf of Ward 5 residents, thank you very much.
Now, may I add a comment here? Regarding MSD, and the same thing goes with MoDOT. I think we need to put pressure on these guys to cooperate with us. MSD said that they wanted additional money a few years ago when they wanted an increase in their funds to take care of the, quote, creeks, and were willing to tax people who weren't even in their collection district in order to get that money over and above what would normally be legal for them to do. I think that they owe us some backup for what they did to that creek years ago, or didn't do to the creek years ago, and they promised they would to help to take care of these things. We need to get that $90,000 back from them by having them help us take care of our creek problem. And whatever it takes to put some pressure on them to get it, then I think we need to do that. End of discussion.
If
John?
with this, yeah, I'm completely in agreement with Dr. Gregotti. We need to get on their radar and make them realize that we're not happy customers here, and we need to see more attention paid to Wildwood for the issues that we have. And I think it was very clear when Prop S was proposed, and there was a list, many pages and pages and pages of projects across many cities in St. Louis County. And if I did a find for Wildwood, 2 lines showed up out of probably hundreds and hundreds. And I did a find on other cities. I said, how did this, I saw one city had 2 pages of projects. I said, oh, we need to find out who they know. Because apparently they're getting a lot of good attention, and we had 2 projects. I said to myself, how could the Wildwood residents support this? We're not getting what we put into it back.
Well, to put it in the words of our city engineer, squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Well, hopefully, we're bringing MSD to the table for the erosion committee, and some other people to the table, and so maybe we'll make some headway.
I think we need to. I mean, it's you know, the perfect world I want to see is continue to be partners with all the utility companies, and I think a lot of them realize, you know, that we want our customers treated right. But if there's one that's not doing it, and if it's MSD, then, you know, we need to see about what will get their attention. You know, and that's, I don't know what that means. Could be something there.
And our next item is presentation of the department's operating budget for its parks functions, fiscal year 2020, all boards.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the committee, we have about 40 minutes left, and I certainly want to respect your time. And we struck our normal budget presentation substantially, and then we provided you just a single piece of paper which kind of summarizes, I think, the key points. But before we kind of dive into the numbers very briefly, I think it's always positive for you all to see what you've accomplished. I don't think sometimes you all realize that we can do all the brainstorming. We can bring you ideas, you bring ideas, and ultimately something may come out of that process that's tangible. But as representing 8 wards and 16 of you never share, I think the collective, that was a really good job. And so what we've done in 2019, at least in terms of planning accomplishments, and this is collective. As you know, we've launched, for the most part, 3 new committees to look at issues that are facing Wildwood. And I think that's a positive. We don't let things basically come to us and be reactive. We try to be proactive in addressing them when we find out that they have an impact on the city. So we have the Town Center Update Team, we have the Watershed Erosion Task Force, and then of course, when Better Together was more popular, the Wildwood Preservation Commission. Sam is now working with the Wildwood Preservation Commission, and I think their focus now is going to be more on the Board of Freeholders plan and what comes out of that process between the city, county, and et cetera.
Thanks for that.
We completed the update of the Parks and Recreation Action Plan. That was done with a group of volunteers from each ward, council liaisons, Dr. Gagnani again, and Front and Center and others. We processed over 600 zoning authorizations. The number is down a little, and I don't necessarily have a particular reason. The economy certainly isn't the reason for less zoning authorizations, but I will tell you, there's more single-family dwellings in the last couple of years than we've done collectively over the last 5 years. So we're adding population, which is always a positive when we think about the 2020 census next year. We completed the 4th chapter in the Wildwood Written History book and the 2019 Points of Interest map. We added Mary Cliff to our city's historic register, probably one of the most prominent historic structures in all of West St. Louis County, if not the St. Louis region. Kathy single-handedly keeps us in Tree City, so we can put our little signs at the entry into Wildwood. We received $25,000 in trim grant funding for our ash tree removal program. We processed 12 subdivision plats. Again, numbers a little lower than in past years, but again, don't have a particular reason to explain. But we still manage almost $9 million in escrow funds from subdivisions that are underway or ones that have started. There's a lull in activity, but the escrow stays along with it. We updated bylaws for our 2 major standing commissions, planning and zoning and historic preservation. We completed 4 zoning code amendments, one of which was medical marijuana. So we're keeping pace with the changing landscape relative to that particular item. 4 CUPs, 2 game courts, and 1 simplified conditional use permit for the goat farm. And the lady who takes her goats out to basically take care of weeds, growth, and et cetera. We manage the city's social media pages, and the thing I like to note here is we increase followers on all the platforms, whether it be Facebook, our 2 pages on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. So we are reaching people each day, and we're reaching more and more. Our goals for 2020, we want to finish the planning design component for town center public space. We talked about that tonight. The town center update team will complete its task probably sometime in early 2020. The completion will be the public input phase. But then once that's done, we need to update the town center development manual and get all the paperwork to Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. The Watershed Erosion Task Force is on a very fast timeline led by Dr. Rennie. So we're thinking we'll complete that process in 2020. And I think a key point coming out of that Watershed Erosion Task Force is the next time MSD puts a list together of problem areas and creeks, you're not going to just have 2 from Wildwood. Because that's a major focus is to identify as many of those hot spots in the 9 watersheds as possible, so we know where they are. We can basically monitor them on a continuing basis and know when we've got a major problem that's about to explode instead of just waiting to have it happen and not know. We'll participate in the board freeholders plan we'll requested, and I think pretty exciting is we hope to complete the 5th chapter, the final chapter of the Wildwood history book. That'll take us through the incorporation effort and until 2020. A lot of housekeeping items, and part of that is we don't have many capital improvements this year. We're cutting back substantially. We'll talk about that at a future meeting and read on that. We'll consolidate older zoning authorizations into a single accessible format. We'll implement work programs for the Planning and Zoning and Historic Preservation Commissions. We'll continue our social media efforts. We've had a good meeting with our new administrators and others. We have, I think, a real good plan for the future. We've got a lot of filing to do, and then we'll always stick on the website and try to make it the best website we can for the residents of Wildwood and all of you.
That's it, I think. The next one's the best, so we're going to planning first.
So I'm referencing now the double-sided piece of paper that I left with you too. From the perspective of the planning component of the department, the operating budget will have a slight increase of 3.6% this year. I try to explain, I think there's that bit of increase, but that is offset by almost a 5% decrease in parks. So quite frankly, this year, the 2020 proposed budget will be less than the estimated 2019 budget, at least in terms of operating revenues from the Department of Planning and Parks. How did we end up with a slight increase in planning? Well, there are minimal changes to almost all the line items. But I think most importantly is we're expecting less development activity in 2020 than we've seen in the past couple of years. So contractual and consulting services reflect that. Reduction in printing expenses. Again, we're shifting more to online just as everybody else is. Slight increases in training and travel. That's something Sam and I talked about. He's a very big advocate of it as I. It's hard to get people out of the office to take advantage, but I think Sam has some ideas. So the next couple I want to talk a little bit more in detail. The first is we retain the annual calendar. And there may be feeling among some of us that the calendar may be something that could be sacrificed to basically address some of our budget concerns. It's about a $20,000 cost to the Department of Planning, primarily all printing and mailing, quite frankly. The idea would be not to eliminate the contest component. We would call it a photo contest and ask people to submit photos and do some type of contest, awards, things like that. It just wouldn't end up on a calendar that we mail to 13,000 households.
So you're looking at reducing the cost of the calendar by making a change with that?
Actually eliminating
Oh, eliminating,
So
okay.
the proposed budget that you guys received included a reduction
Yeah.
from last year's, or this year's amount to next year. My thought on that was, we don't know how many of our residents actually enjoy the benefit of that calendar. So if we perhaps reduce the printing, the number of the print runs, and then also maybe changed up the distribution, we would get a better handle. So looking at maybe delivering calendars to the senior center home here in downtown, maybe a couple of businesses around
Sounds
town, and then just sort of get a head count. If we needed to print more, we could print more, but otherwise, I think it'd be.
So you're targeting half, like, are you gonna go with half or less than a
It was a
third?
25% reduction is what I.
Oh,
put in the budget.
25% reduction. Yeah, I thought maybe half even, just
Yeah.
to see, maybe go to half, and then if you get demand, you can always get more printed. But I think you've made a great point. I mean, people use their phones for calendars.
And I think to Joe's point, I mean, the benefit we get as an organization is the use of those photos. So we can put those on our social media pages, on our website, you know, we can use those as the banners, as you go on our website. you see
That's what I was just
pictures
gonna
change.
ask,
We can
about
rotate
banners
those
through
around.
town center.
You could still do those photos then, yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
some beautiful photos that I wouldn't want to lose.
Okay.
That, I just made the comment that one suggestion I might have is rather than put photos on the calendar, put them on banners so that people's artwork can be shown in a more visible spot than the calendar that gets tossed in a lot of cases.
Did you want to finish going through this and then
Well,
open it up, or?
Dr. Bagnani also
I
has
have
a
a
question.
question. Why not run the calendar contest, photo contest, and do the calendar, but don't mail it out? Have it available for people to pick up here at City Hall, and put them out for people to take when they come to meetings?
That's what.
Just eliminate the postage, because that's the big cost.
Yeah.
I did rebid it and get the price drop this year for the printing, so.
Great price per calendar. Good job,
Yeah,
Kathy.
thank
So what did that bring it down to?
We print 14,000 calendars, it's just over $9,000. It's about 80 cents a calendar.
So you're
is the
saving
printing cost.
$100,000 roughly on that.
Yeah,
by
if you
not
don't do the
mailing it.
postage.
Which is about half.
Does that include the mailing or?
No.
No.
No,
Just the
and last
calendar.
year, the printing was almost $10,000, so we saved by rebidding it almost $800 to $1,000, so.
With the same number as last year?
Yes.
So now you're gonna
That would
reduce it
be-
even further. You're bringing it down to like about $5,000-$6,000 in for the
That would be
calendar?
a question. We could get some
2020,
pricing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, for 2020. We already have money in the budget for this year for the 2020 calendar, so I would assume, right? 2020 calendar is paid for this budget.
Yeah.
Do we answer?
It was brought up last year during the budget discussion, but a decision was made to do at least one more year before we made any changes. The other one that is retained, but we haven't really spent much of it over the course of the last 5 years, is the Strucker Forest site. And that is typically about $25,000. It's set aside in the event we need a specialized consultant to respond either to the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, the Environmental Protection Agency, et cetera. Again, I think one year we spent maybe about $6,000, but it's a cost that is carried by the budget, the operating end of the budget, and it's just something to think about. We retain service contracts with our escrow management system, which is with Regis, website hosting, and other online media. Again, these are critical components to keep information available to our residents and others. We have no new projects or initiatives in 2020 relative to the Department of Planning. Again, we're being conscious of the budget considerations. And then any existing projects that are underway and are funded will be allowed to be completed. And that has to deal with an easement that was granted to the city for a bridge replacement, stormwater management considerations in the manors at the Meadows of Cherry Hills, and the aquaculture and the constant emitters of sound. Those are individual contracts we have with certain consultants that were authorized this year that'll carry over into next year. So those are kind of the highlights of why the department's trying to shave its budget as much as possible. And I'll do parks and then we can talk. I'll do it a little quicker. There's not as many.
Well, except here comes our video. So I
Oh,
might
yeah.
indulge you all.
Make it long or so, please. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very fine.
His beard.
Notice there's no kids in that picture.
That was amazing.
That's the back
That
of
was
school part.
awesome. Yeah. Mhm.
And I want to emphasize it's a we, not just any individual department, or city hall, or any particular council person, it's a we. So in 2019, we launched the Parks and Recreation application. We dedicated the Nothin to John Weller Cave of Royal Trailhead. We completed relocation of Wildwood Farms Community Garden. We will, as of next week, complete phase 3 of Community Park minus the bridge, but the bridge is coming. And will only take a week to put in place. It's coming, all 90 feet of it's coming on one truck. That should be interesting. And they started the parking lot expansion at Alfoster Memorial Trailhead, and they almost completed the grading in 2 days. And that'll tell you what, when you have flat ground and good dirt, it goes relatively easy. It's amazing. So those are the accomplishments, and there's only a list of 5, but as you can see, we tackled some tough projects this year.
And there were over 250 events.
Yeah.
And then goals for next year. Construct Ward 5 Park, thank you. We would have lined through that if it didn't work out. Conduct our 25th anniversary celebrations in 2020. We're trying to add a few teen programs in the summer of 2019. It's a demographic group that we aren't hitting as much as we'd like. And then we'll host over 250 recreation events from our early childhood rec programs, Home Alone, Babysitting 101, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to just make one concluding remark. Our senior programming is paid by community development block grant funding. thank you for doing that. We're able to basically spend $25,500 in, and we get reimbursed from the federal government through St. Louis County, so it doesn't cost us anything other than the staffing and some of the preparation things, but it's a great use, I think, of the community development block grant. So, we're decreasing the budget in parks, and there are slight increases in equipment leasing, and this was primarily the portable restroom facilities we have at many of our park and trail locations. Minimal changes in much of the line items, which includes recreational supplies, printing, and special events. Nominal increases in consultant and contractual services, and this relates more to a few of the maintenance items we think we need to do, and that's what we're going to focus on. Since it's our 25th anniversary, things like painting Pond School, some of the fascia boards, trim boards, just need a little touching up, and we want to make everything look as good as possible for the 25th anniversary. There's a reduction in the amounts for the concert series. We retain senior programming. We retain core programs and facilities like the community garden, farmers market, the twin events of the city Celebrate Wildwood Art Festival at approximate 2019 levels. We retain the Wildwood Barbecue Bash and the Pond Athletic Association donation. A couple of things there. The Barbecue Bash is now at $51,000. It's something that Sam and I have talked about, as well as the donation of $10,000 to the Pond Athletic Association. Certainly they wouldn't be popular decisions to eliminate, but again, I'm offering that as a consideration because I recognize your constituents are asking where's the money going.
And I think if I could add to a couple of things, let Joe sit down for a little bit, take a break. Wildwood is not unique in giving donations to other organizations in the community. What I experienced in Joplin was the city that was facing a lot of fiscal constraints, and what they worked out was an agreement with a lot of those organizations to maybe step down the contribution from the city, so it wasn't all, the impact wasn't felt in just that single year. Typically, I think we recommended for a lot of the organizations maybe a 20% annual reduction in the contribution from the city, and that gives that organization time to think about some fundraising efforts to step up and help plug that gap, recognizing that you are pulling funding away from them for their operations and programming, and being sensitive to that, but also being sensitive to more global issues. Similar to Joe's point about spending public dollars on private property, a similar argument can be made in terms of financial support from the city for nonprofit organizations. And then the Barbecue Bash and Celebrate Wildwood and the Art Festival, those are all really popular events, and I've had several conversations with most of you, one-on-one conversations. We do events really well. One thing I don't think we maybe capitalize on is participation from outside groups. So we could be doing more to encourage and recruit volunteers to help with those events, to help offset some of the city staff time that's spent on those projects, or perhaps even a financial contribution or an in-kind contribution of some sort to be able to help continue to provide those events for the community, because that's what we do really well, and that's what a lot of people love about Wildwood, but still being able to sort of lighten that load so it's not completely on the city shoulders for a lot of those events. So just a couple of thoughts. Again, we haven't pulled any of those dollars out of the budget for 2020, but they are potential options that council can consider.
Well, one of the thoughts that I've had for many years is all of the high schools require so much volunteer work by the students, and we're not capitalizing on that resource at all to help offset. Now, granted, managing teenagers can be a challenge at times. I realize this.
Bring it on.
What?
Bring it on. I live with them. It's,
I know.
I got it.
I've been there too. And I've got a nephew that's 16 right now, and it's like, anyway. So I think we need to look at how we can capitalize on some of those resources. And you've also got private entities that are wanting to advertise somehow, but you could have them advertising while they're volunteering to, just like the Lions and the Rotary Club do for selling the beer at the barbecue bash. You know, they provide that venue, they pay for it all, and it gives you what we need for that event, so.
And you mentioned banners earlier, using the photos from the contest. Cities have seen a great deal of success in selling advertising space at the bottom of banners.
Yeah,
So
mhm,
the
mhm.
local company can provide
Yeah.
a certain amount of dollars towards buying a banner.
Well, I may be wrong, we used to do that with the Founder's Day, that was just now celebrating Wildwood.
Mhm.
We were charging $500 or various amounts for the banners. Are you not doing that anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you. Just to-
I have not been engaged with that event, so I don't know. I want to bring up a point. I'm not going to be popular with the crowd out there. I think it's time to ask for another quarter to an 8% sales tax, specifically earmarked for parks and trails. We tried putting that through a number of years ago. Actually, there was a large group of the original founders who supported it. We just barely lost that election. I think the time has come for people to realize that we're paying, you look at this budget, we're paying a lot of money for parks and trails, and the expenditures that go out are much larger than what's coming in. So I think that people got to realize that this isn't just a free lunch program. To some extent, we have to support these programs, and we have to support these structures and these issues. I personally would be in favor of asking for an 1/8 to 1/4% sales tax increase on revenues collected here in the city of Wildwood. We had a small increase a number of years ago. We haven't had one for a long time. And I think maybe it's time to consider that again.
And that's a nice segue. I don't want to step on Joe or Kathy's toes in terms of expenditures, but, you know, shifting the conversation towards revenues. I mean, that, at the end of the day, we aren't going to be able to nickel and dime our way out of a budget deficit. Currently, our operating fund, it's about $360,000. You have two options. You can either reduce expenditures, and at the point a lot of cities reduce, there's only so much you can trim from the bone before you're impacting personnel. And that's, I'm not going to recommend ever, as long as I'm the city administrator, that we reduce staffing at the city level. It's just, we can't.
You can't.
The alternative then, you know, to help improve the fiscal situation is a revenue increase. And I've, again, had conversations with council members one-on-one. I haven't summarized my entire conversation with everybody just yet. But that has been a topic that's come up. I know the Parks Planning Committee has talked about it. The Watershed Erosion Task Force, I think, is doing important work on identifying some stormwater issues. And there is a funding source available to the residents of the city of Wildwood that we haven't tapped into yet, which is a potential parks and stormwater sales tax. And, I don't know when that conversation needs to happen with voters, and I don't necessarily know exactly what that conversation looks like at this point. But past experience has told me if we can present a good list of projects and paint the picture that we face financially, you then start to be able to build a pretty strong case to go out to different groups of voters and be able to say, this is the financial picture we're facing. Here's a way to help solve some of that and still provide a lot of the amenities that we do so well.
Well, I think you got to engage the public. I mean, we've done this before, and I know that we did a Q&A when we did the city hall. There was a lot of back and forth about, you know, is it fiscally responsible to do it, blah, blah, blah. I think part of the issue was that people wanted input about what the city hall looked like. We gave them that. And then one of the issues that Don, at that time, rest his soul, Don Kozlowski and I put out a flyer to the public, and it was a Q&A, and it said, you know, what's the benefit of building a city hall? And we answered the question. We said, we have our own facility, which will be paid off, and all we have to do is do maintenance on it. We don't have to pay rent forever, and so forth and so on. We had a list of things, and what is it going to cost? And we had a specific number, and we went through all that. And I think a lot of people saw that and they said, yeah, it makes sense. You know, It wasn't an overwhelming vote in favor, but it passed, and here we are in the city hall that we allocated. I think the same thing can happen with the parks, trails, whatever. People see these things. These are tangible items, and so it's not like it's some mysterious, nebulous, well, what are you doing with the money? Go out there and walk on it, okay? I think they can see that. And it may be practical to have some town halls, meetings where we just invite the public in and say, this is what we need for you, the people, to do, to help yourselves, so that we can get stuff done for you. And I think that works very well around here, at least it used to. I don't know, maybe it doesn't work anymore, but that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I would like to echo the comments that you're making here, because they are good points, and it's all about how we can inform and educate the public. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there that is going on. There's a belief that there's a property tax that gets paid to the city of Wildwood.
There is.
There's talk of, that we're doubling the size of the town center and bringing in all this stuff when there's none of that. I mean, there's just a lot of misinformation and rumors, and it is up to us to help make sure that we are aligned with what is the message, and that we all do our part to help inform and educate folks with the true facts of what's going on. And so, I think back about 2015, I think there was an item on the ballot for a sewer lateral insurance program. $50 a year to protect your home, and it did not pass.
And again, it was because we didn't have enough education.
I think that's the true thing, education, misinformation. If you live, out on the western edge of the city, do I have to pay it or not? All this kind of stuff. And so if we do pursue something and we make sure that we have a good solid case and we can tell the story, I would suggest we make sure we build in enough time to do that education and do it the right way and not rush it, because otherwise we will not have the time to do it and it will fail. But yes, I agree. We do have a lot that folks enjoy, and there's no property tax. We are very fortunate that we are under the pool formula, and so, there's a case to be made to pay for some of these services. At the same time, try to show folks what we can do. I think that's something we can hopefully get everyone behind.
And I think we should start right away, like debunking some of these ideas that are out there that aren't true. Maybe just on the e-newsletter or the website, just say, do you know Wildwood doesn't have a municipal tax? Or something like that.
I put it on the website.
I want to comment, I know Sam hasn't heard this, I know Joe has, and some of the rest of you probably have too. I've been at this for 30 years, right? Counting the time that we were in incarceration. And for 30 years, I had to answer the question, we're paying too much property tax. And no, you're not. Not to the city of Wildwood, you're not. And I've had to answer that question just recently, okay? It's amazing. The people, I don't know if they don't see their property tax bills or what the deal is, but they don't seem to grasp the concept that the number next to Wildwood is 0. And so I have to remind them repeatedly that there is no property tax here in Wildwood. And I don't want to see one here in Wildwood. And I think trying to get a property tax passed here in Wildwood will be a big flop-ola. So I think we need to not go that direction, but we do need to make people aware that there ain't one.
Right,
That's right.
right. Crystal?
So Joe, this tax that they're talking about, the stormwater in parks, is that the one that we have to run individually because city can't be involved in that one?
Yes, we can provide information.
Yeah, by state statute, city is not allowed to advocate for any potential.
Okay.
Once
I
an
was
issue
wondering if
is
that's the
on
same
the
thing.
ballot,
Okay.
a city representative can't, say, oh, yes.
They can only answer questions, they can't legally advocate for it. You have to get private individuals to do that. As an individual council member, you can't do it as a council member, but you can do it as an individual. So if people ask you, you can talk about it and say, yeah, I think it's a great idea. But it's not because you're a council member, it's because you're just Crystal
You
McEwen,
cannot
do you think
use
it's a great
city
idea?
funds. The actual statute of language is you can't use city funds to advocate for a ballot issue.
Yeah, and it takes those people to go door to door. I think that's what we were looking at, the Park Action Committee. But I think that if that's something that's going to do, I think that that type of committee should be put together to formulate a plan and to raise some funds so they can do some printing and education.
So that would be a political action committee to do that.
Something, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's your educational segue.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't create a PAC.
Well, yeah.
I knew you were
But
gonna
I
know
do
that.
agree.
Now, you know what, those are not popular around
I
here.
hear you. But you also, I don't know what other choices, if there's money.
Yeah, so what, you want to go to the presidential election? I mean, what is the popularity
You know,
of when to do it
I've talked
on the ballot?
a lot in my own head about this, and some with other departments as well. I mean, the available dates in 2020, and I would be hesitant to do anything in April.
Oh,
because
no.
that's a council
We,
election.
we gotta get,
And historically, it's a
6 to 9
bad
months.
idea to put tax issues on an issue with,
Right.
you know, local election.
Actually,
August-
that's not true here.
Yeah.
I was gonna
Maybe
tell you.
not. That's entirely possible. My experience has been that.
Don't put it in the November election, particularly with a presidential election.
So you've got,
It'll get
primary-
hammered.
you've got essentially August, which would be a primary.
That's another possibility.
In some cities, law would apply, you could do March, but that would be too soon.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I was wondering.
August can give you 8 good months.
And I don't want to paint the picture that the iceberg is, 50 feet in front of us, and we don't do anything now, we're going to crash. We have a pretty healthy fund balance.
Yeah.
We can cover, transfers into some of these other funds for a year or two, but that's just not sustainable in the long term. So it's best to start having conversations early, whether we would actually put an issue on the ballot in 20 or 21. I would feel more comfortable in 2021, just because of the election attention that's going to get next year. Flip side of that is you're going to have a lot of turnout, and you're going to have a really good idea about how your voters feel about an issue, because you're going to hear from more of them during a presidential election season. So you can make the argument.
but we could have volunteers perhaps standing in the long lines. Well, no, they can't go across the line. We could come up with some way during that election season to
There are a lot of
get
strategies.
public input on their feelings about it so that we could maybe know how to do it better in 2021.
Joe, do you want to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, typically with the parks and stormwater sales tax, it's a good funding source to fund new projects and then ongoing maintenance of those projects as well.
Yeah.
They're allowed by state statute. If you construct a project with parks and stormwater sales tax, you can then use that sales tax to fund the ongoing maintenance of that as well.
That's been a big concern of mine as these park properties continue to grow and expand. The ongoing maintenance is going to be something that hits our budget, so.
So Joe, do you want to address any other items on the agenda?
Well, if I could just say, again, we give you a lot of information on the budget. There is more to follow. But please, if you have any questions, please contact Sam, Dawn, or I regarding planning and parks, and we'll do our very best to answer the last two items are updates relating to expenditures for park and trail maintenance, as well as the revenues we collect, as well as an update on our Parks Action Plan and the events that we've held in the last 2 months, or excuse me, months. So if you have any questions, Gary or Kathy can answer them. If not, we have completed our task.
I have a motion to adjourn.
I have one question,
Okay.
and it doesn't need to be answered right now, but I've had a couple of residents asking about water cooling sources at the dog park in City Park. And like, do we have hoses that we can hose the dogs down when it's 95 degrees out and we take them out there? Or do we have a water source? And I'm just curious as to whether that's something that any other city has ever provided. I've got one resident in particular very adamant that, well, where I went, my dog gets hot.
Let me get this straight, they want to spray the dogs with water?
Yes, to cool them
I don't know
down.
about their dogs, but my dog would go berserk.
I'm just putting it out there as a question as to, is it possible? And if so, what's the cost?
We'll look into it for you now. We'll look into it.
Okay.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Crystal, second. Katie? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you all again.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it very much.
Anyway, that I'll email you.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if it's, I saw your comments on your problems and how it's set up, but they put a new box in it, and I don't know if it now, it's like, well, the reason they said that's not all right. I'm telling you, I don't know, is a bird in there running
Oh,
out?
snake. Snake in there.
And your neighborhood?
That's it.
I think